My name is Stacy Rose. I'm 30 years old, and for the first time in my life, a door with my name on it actually closes when I need it to. I bought my house 3 years ago. A modest 3-bedroom place with creaky floors, chipped paint near the hallway light switch, and a fig tree out front that refuses to bear fruit. Still, it's mine. After years of renting cramped apartments and listening to strangers argue through paper walls, the quiet here feels like a prize I worked my whole life to earn. I'm a software engineer, the kind of job where deadlines and caffeine fight for custody of your sanity. My home is my recharge station. The master bedroom is my haven. The second bedroom is my office, where I do video meetings and late-night debugging sessions. The third is my guest room, or was anyway. 2 weeks ago, I drove to my parents' house after work because Mom said there was an important family talk. I thought maybe they were planning a vacation or announcing retirement plans, but the moment I stepped into their oversized living room, I sensed the tension. My father, Jackson, sat forward with his elbows on his knees, like he was chairing a meeting again. Mom, Evelyn, was all smiles, the kind she puts on before dropping news that changes everyone's week. "Sweetheart," she began, "we've decided to sell the house. It's too big now, and keeping up with the yard is just exhausting." "That's great," I said honestly. "Have you looked into any 55-plus communities near—" "Oh, we're not rushing," she cut me off. "We want to find the perfect place. That's why we need a favor." Dad cleared his throat. "We'll need somewhere to stay for a few weeks, just until we find our new home. You've got that spare room, and we helped you with college." There it was, the "we helped you" line. A debt that had already been repaid through birthday gifts, Christmas presents, and restaurant bills I'd quietly covered over the years. But saying that aloud would have turned the night into a guilt war I wasn't ready to fight. "Dad, I work from home," I said. "I need my office for my job." "You can work anywhere," he said with a dismissive wave. "It's all computers, isn't it?" Mom clasped her hands. "We won't be in your way, sweetheart. Family helps family." Later that night, my phone lit up with a call from my sister Sarah, who lives in Seattle. "Mom said you're hesitating," she started, her tone already full of judgment. "They won't be around forever, Stacy." "They're 58 and 56, I said flatly. "They're still our parents," she pressed. "You have a house. They just need a room. What's the big deal?" The big deal was my space, the only thing I had that was fully mine. But I didn't say that. I just sat there, staring at the ceiling, knowing that if I said no, I'd be painted as the selfish daughter. When I told my boyfriend Ethan about it, he frowned. "You're kind, Stacy. Too kind sometimes. If you do this, get it in writing. Boundaries aren't rude, they're insurance." He was right. That night, I typed up a short agreement. 2 months maximum, my office off limits during work hours, no rearranging furniture, guests only with prior notice, and my Friday nights are mine. I sent it to my parents. Mom texted back a heart emoji and wrote, "Of course, sweetheart. You won't even notice we're there." Move-in day. I noticed. From 3 blocks away. Their SUV sagged under the weight of boxes. Dad's sedan followed, stuffed to the roof. They arrived like a traveling circus. Boxes marked fragile. Mom's pillows. Precious moments collection. Dad carried in a box labeled trophies, with the same reverence priests reserved for relics. "We kept it to essentials," Mom said brightly, "for warmth." "You said you were putting things in storage." "These are personal," she replied. "I can't live without my things. A house doesn't feel like home without them." By sundown, my kitchen had been optimized. My coffee maker was moved into a cabinet because it looked cluttered. My utensils had been rearranged for efficiency. My favorite hallway posters? Gone. Mom said they looked juvenile. But the real test came Monday morning. I was in a Zoom meeting when my office door swung open, despite the big laminated sign that read, "On a call." "Stacy," Mom said, walking in. "Where's the good coffee? The one that doesn't taste like dirt?" I froze. My manager chuckled on camera. "Is that your mom, Stacy?" I smiled tightly. "Just my temporary roommate." After the call, I explained calmly, "Mom, when my door is closed, it means I'm working. Please knock first." Her expression shifted from confusion to insult. "In a family home, we don't knock. That's not how I raised you." "This isn't a family home," I said before I could stop myself. "It's my home, where you're staying temporarily." The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut through drywall. That evening, Dad turned the TV up to volume 45 to watch golf. When I asked him to lower it, he said, "If you need quiet, get better walls." Their house hunting was non-existent. When I asked, they'd say things like, "We're still researching," or "The market's tricky right now." Translation: no effort. Then came Friday, my game night. I'd told them days in advance that Ethan and a few friends were coming over. We were halfway through a card game when Mom walked in, her smile dripping with curiosity. "Oh, you're playing those again," she said, as if I'd been caught drawing on the walls. "Jackson, come see what the kids are up to." Dad appeared, peering over our shoulders. "Grown adults with cards," he muttered. "When I was 30, I was raising a family." "Different times," Mom replied with a sigh. "Though you'd think Stacy would want to settle down soon." Ethan looked like he was about to say something, but I squeezed his hand under the table. My friends left early. When I came back from saying goodbye at the door, my parents were already on the couch, watching TV like nothing had happened. The next day, I walked into my living room and stopped cold. My gaming setup, the one I'd built piece by piece, was boxed up. My bookshelf had been reorganized by color, not by genre. And my father was sitting in my office chair, browsing on my computer. "Dad, what are you doing?" "Checking my email. My laptop's slow. There are sensitive files on there." "Relax," he said, minimizing a browser window so fast I almost didn't see it. "Vacation rentals. Florida." That night, they called a family meeting. Mom unfolded a piece of paper and began reading. "We think we need some structure. Quiet hours after 10, no guests without a day's notice, and you should probably contribute more to groceries since you eat the most." I blinked. "You're setting rules? In my house?" "We're creating harmony," Dad said in his calm, managerial tone. "It's called compromise." "You've been here 2 weeks," I said. "The agreement was 2 months maximum." "Agreements change," Dad replied. "Circumstances evolve." That night, I sat alone in the kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound that still belonged to me. My coffee maker, which Mom had hidden away, sat back on the counter where it belonged. I plugged it in and pressed brew, just to hear something I controlled. As the first drip hit the carafe, I realized how loud the house felt when you didn't own your silence anymore. Upstairs, a door opened without knocking. And I knew this was only the beginning. 2 weeks. That's all it took for my house to stop feeling like mine. Every morning started with my dad watching the news at max volume while Mom rearranged drawers, like she was auditioning for the home edit. The temporary stay began to sound like a fantasy I'd made up to comfort myself. The day after their family meeting, I came downstairs to find my coffee maker gone. Again. This time, she'd replaced it with a porcelain teapot that whistled like a jet engine. "Where's my coffee machine?" I asked, holding the cord like evidence. "In the pantry," Mom said sweetly. "That noisy thing ruins the calm of the kitchen." "It's my kitchen." "Exactly," she said, not even looking at me. "And you'll thank me when you start drinking tea instead of that sludge." I wanted to laugh or scream. I did neither. When I got to my office for work, my "on a call" sign was missing. I found it in the trash. That night, Ethan came over. I handed him the sign like it was a crime scene clue. "They're testing me," I said quietly. He set it down on the counter. "No, they're training you. The question is whether you'll let them." Before I could respond, Mom walked in, smiling like we were in a commercial. "Oh, Ethan, we were just talking about you. You two should think about marriage soon. Before you get too old to enjoy it." Ethan froze mid-sip of water. Good to see you too, Mrs. Rose." She patted his arm. "Call me Evelyn, dear, or Mom, if you prefer." He smiled politely. I could see the muscle in his jaw twitch. When she finally left the room, he turned to me. "They're not planning to leave, are they?" "I don't think so," I admitted. "You can't let this keep snowballing. They'll take the whole house." His warning hung in the air long after he left. The next morning, I woke up to hammering sounds. I threw on a hoodie and ran downstairs. Dad was in the living room, installing new curtain rods, without asking. "What are you doing?" I asked. He didn't look up. "Improving the lighting. You had blackout curtains. It's depressing." "Dad, you're drilling into my walls." "You're welcome," he said casually. "You'll thank me when you see how much brighter it feels." I texted Ethan. "They're nesting, like birds with power tools." He sent back, "Start recording. Document everything." I thought he was overreacting. I wasn't ready to admit he was right. A week later, Mom called me into the kitchen. "We've been thinking about the front yard," she said, smiling too sweetly. "It's boring." "It's grass," I replied. "That's kind of the point." "Well, your father's going to plant a little vegetable garden, just a few tomatoes. It'll give the house some charm." "Mom, this neighborhood has an HOA." She waved her hand. "Rules are for people who don't know what they're doing." By Sunday, half the lawn was dug up. On Monday, I got an email. "HOA violation. Unauthorized landscaping. Fine, $350. When I confronted them, Mom acted shocked. They fined you? That's ridiculous. We'll take care of it. They didn't. That Friday, I came home to a full-blown book club in my living room. 7 of Mom's friends, women I'd never seen before, were sipping wine and laughing. "Oh, there she is," Mom said, waving me over. "Everyone, this is our daughter, Stacy. She owns this lovely home." "Co-owns," corrected one of her friends with a knowing smile. "Your mother told us all about how you bought it together. That's so smart in this economy." I blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" Mom's laugh came too fast. "Oh, don't be so literal, sweetheart. You make it sound like we're mooching off you." I excused myself to the kitchen and texted Ethan. "They told people they co-own my house." He replied, "You need to protect yourself legally." The next day, I started documenting everything. Photos, dates, messages. Still, part of me didn't want to believe it had come to that. But then came the locksmith. It was a bright Saturday morning when I pulled into the driveway and froze. A white van sat parked there, bold letters reading Rapid Lock Solutions. My dad stood next to it, chatting with a technician. "Dad, what's going on?" "Security upgrade," he said. "Old locks were outdated. We found a deal online." "Without asking me?" "You'll thank us later," Mom said from the porch. "We even got smart locks. You'll feel so much safer." I stared at them. "I don't feel safe right now." The locksmith looked nervous. Ma'am, are you the homeowner?" "Yes," I said immediately. "Stop working. Please leave." The man nodded, packed up his tools, and drove off. My parents stared at me like I'd just committed treason. "You embarrassed us," Dad said. "You embarrassed yourself," I snapped. "This is my property." For the next 3 days, they gave me the silent treatment. But I could still hear them, whispering loud enough for me to catch fragments like "ungrateful" and "we raised her better." When I thought things couldn't get worse, they did. A few days later, I came home early from work and heard voices in the kitchen. I thought they were talking to each other until I turned the corner. A realtor and a young couple were standing there holding brochures. "Hi," the realtor said cheerfully. "We're here for the showing." "The what?" Mom and Dad froze. "They told me they were the homeowners," the realtor stammered. I looked at her, then at them. "You told someone you owned my house?" Dad cleared his throat. "We were just curious about the market, for comparison." "By pretending to sell my home?" The couple fled. The realtor apologized, mumbling something about misunderstandings. When the door closed, Dad pointed a finger at me. "You overreacted. You made us look foolish." "You're lucky that's all you looked," I shot back. That night, I drafted a formal notice to vacate, with help from Ethan's lawyer friend. I left copies on the kitchen table and mailed one certified to myself for record keeping. When I handed Dad his copy, he didn't even glance at it. "You can't evict us," he said. "I can, actually." "You'd take your own parents to court?" Mom said, voice dripping disbelief. "Imagine what people will think." Dad smiled coldly. "We've been here over 60 days. We get mail here. We've established residency." My stomach turned to ice. "You're not tenants," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You don't pay rent." "Exactly," Mom said with a small triumphant smile. "We're family." Later that night, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the shadows on my wall. I used to love how quiet this house was. Now every sound, every footstep, every cupboard door felt like an invasion. Ethan called. "You okay?" "No," I said softly. "They're never leaving." He didn't say "I told you so." He just said, "Then it's time to make them want to." His tone was calm. But in that moment, I realized something. If my parents wouldn't respect boundaries, I'd have to draw them in permanent ink. And maybe, for the first time in my life, I was ready to. I never imagined I'd have to research tenant laws to get my parents out of my house. But there I was, scrolling through legal forms at 2 a.m., my laptop screen glowing like a ghost. Every thread said the same thing. Once someone establishes residency, even family, eviction is a legal process. 2 months. That was all it took for temporary to become permanent. The next morning, I asked my parents if they'd made progress on their house hunt. "We're looking," Mom said, buttering toast like we were discussing the weather. "Have you contacted any realtors?" "We don't need to rush." Dad looked up from his tablet. "You're obsessed with timelines, Stacy. Patience is a virtue." I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. That night, I went to dinner with Ethan and my best friend Leah. She listened as I vented, sipping her wine with growing disbelief. "Stace, this is beyond manipulation," Leah said. "They're not confused. They're calculating." Ethan nodded. "You need to go official. Lawyer, documentation, everything." "I already served them notice," I said, pushing my plate away. They laughed. Leah leaned in. "Then make them uncomfortable." "How?" Ethan answered before she could, by making it officially real. Paperwork scares people who are used to emotional control. That weekend, I emailed a lawyer named Margaret Turner, a specialist in property and family disputes. Her reply came within hours. Ms. Rose, I've handled dozens of cases like yours. Start documenting every violation, every conversation, and every expense since they moved in. The law moves slowly, but evidence moves mountains. I created a folder on my desktop called Project Freedom. Every photo, every receipt, every email went in there. A few days later, a letter from the HOA arrived. Another violation. Subject: unauthorized gardening. Repeated infraction. I marched outside, heart pounding. The front yard was a construction zone. Mom had decided the tomatoes looked lonely, so she'd expanded into cucumbers, peppers, and something that looked suspiciously like corn. "Mom," I shouted, "I got fined again." She looked up from her gardening gloves, unfazed. "I'll pay it." "You said that last time." She smiled faintly. "Well, you shouldn't have such strict rules in this neighborhood." I turned to go inside, but Dad called from the porch. "Don't take that tone with your mother. You're lucky we care enough to improve this place." "Improve?" I snapped. "You're getting me fined." He shrugged. "Money comes and goes, families forever." "Not if you keep this up," I muttered under my breath. That night, I overheard them talking in the guest room. The door was cracked open just enough. Dad's voice was low but firm. "If she pushes harder, we'll tell the family she's trying to make us homeless." Mom sighed dramatically. "Sarah will take our side. She always does." "Exactly. Let her handle the PR." PR, like this was some corporate spin campaign. I felt my pulse in my throat. My own parents were planning a narrative against me. I backed away quietly and texted Ethan. "They're turning Sarah against me. I overheard it." He replied instantly, "Let them. Truth wins if you have proof." The next morning, proof arrived uninvited. I walked into the kitchen and found my father at my desk again, sipping coffee from my mug, scrolling through my computer. "Dad," I said, keeping my tone steady, "why are you on my computer again?" He didn't flinch. "Checking some investment accounts." "Your accounts?" He gave me a tight smile. "You'd be surprised how easy it is to lose track of logins at my age." I stepped closer and he minimized the window. I saw the word retirement portfolio flash across the top bar, and the number 784,000. I froze. "You're not broke." "Excuse me." "You told Sarah you needed time because money was tight. You're sitting on almost $800,000. He scowled. "Don't snoop." "You left it open in my home office," I said, shaking. "You're living here rent-free, wrecking my house while lying to everyone about needing help." He stood towering over me. "Watch your tone, young lady." Mom appeared in the doorway, arms folded. "Don't raise your voice at your father." I turned to her. "You've both been lying to me." "Lower your voice, she said sharply. "The neighbors might hear." That was the moment I realized. They cared more about appearances than truth. 3 days later, the situation went nuclear. At 6:10 a.m. on a Saturday, I woke to voices downstairs, unfamiliar ones. I grabbed the baseball bat from under my bed and crept down the hall. A realtor stood in my kitchen again, this time with another couple. My parents were smiling like they were hosting an open house. "What the hell is going on?" I asked. The realtor blinked. "We're here for the showing." I laughed. A short, bitter sound. "This is my house. There's no showing." The woman looked confused. "Mr. and Mrs. Rose said they owned the property." Dad held up his hands. "We never said that. They must have assumed." The couple left in silence. The realtor, mortified, apologized as she left her card. "Call me if you ever do want to sell," she whispered. When the door shut, Mom rounded on me. "You embarrassed us in front of that woman. You lied to a realtor about owning my house." Dad's jaw clenched. "We were just testing the market. You're so dramatic." "Testing the market on property that isn't yours." "Watch your tone, Stacy," Mom snapped. "You're turning into someone I barely recognize." "Good," I said, "because I'm done being who you expect me to be." That afternoon, I called Margaret again. "File a formal notice to vacate," she instructed. "Send it certified, notarized, and keep digital copies. Make sure there's no ambiguity." I followed every step, printed, signed, mailed. When I handed my parents their copies, Mom barely looked at it. "You think a piece of paper scares us?" she said quietly. "You can't evict family," Dad added, "not without consequences." "What consequences?" I asked. He smiled, slow, cold, the kind you can't fix with a lawyer. That night, Sarah called. "Stace, what are you doing?" she demanded. "Mom's in tears. You're serving legal papers to your parents?" "They've been here for months, Sarah. They lied. They won't leave. They said you're throwing them out onto the street. They have nearly $800,000 in their accounts. Silence. Then, "They said you were making that up. You need therapy, Stace. You're not well." I hung up before I said something unforgivable. When I walked into my office later, I found a note taped to my monitor in my mother's handwriting. "Family is forever, unless you make it temporary." I stared at it for a long time. Then I tore it in half, straightened my back, and said aloud to the empty room, "Fine, then we'll make it officially temporary." For the first time in weeks, I felt something like clarity. The next phase wasn't about asking, it was about acting. I didn't sleep that night. The note on my monitor felt like a curse, and I wasn't about to let it become prophecy. By sunrise, I had made a decision. If my parents wanted to act like tenants, then I would treat them like tenants. I called Margaret, my lawyer, first thing Monday morning. She picked up on the second ring. "Ms. Rose?" "Yes. I'm done negotiating. I want my house back." Margaret's voice was calm, crisp, like ice water on a burn. "Good. Then we change the dynamic. No more guilt, no more emotion. You hold the title. Let's use that." She outlined the plan. Phase 1, documentation. Phase 2, public pressure. Phase 3, leverage. It sounded less like legal advice and more like a chess match, and I was ready to play. Phase 1 started immediately. I hired a private investigator, a woman named Carly, to record everything. The guests they hosted, the changes they made, the book clubs and garden parties. Carly was discreet, professional, and thorough. Within a week, I had photo evidence of them calling themselves co-owners of my property and hosting dinner parties under my address. Phase 2 required subtlety. I called Jennifer, the same realtor my parents had lied to months ago, and invited her back, this time officially. "Jennifer," I said when she picked up, "remember that open house my parents staged without my consent?" "How could I forget?" she said dryly. "Well, I'm holding a real one, this Saturday, 10 a.m., balloons, banners, the works. Spread the word." There was a pause, then a quiet laugh. "Oh, I'd love to." When Saturday came, the street looked like a festival. Bright red "for sale" signs staked into the lawn. Neighbors peeked over fences. Curious buyers milled around with clipboards. Mom came outside in her robe, blinking like she'd stepped into a nightmare. "What on earth is this?" "An open house," I said calmly. "You're selling our home?" "No," I said evenly. "My home." Dad stormed down the steps, face red. "You can't do this without consulting us." "You're not on the deed. People will think you're throwing your parents out on the street." "Maybe," I said, my voice low. "Or maybe they'll realize I'm reclaiming what's mine." Jennifer smiled politely from the sidewalk, waving at a young couple walking up the path. "You must be the owners," the man said to me. I smiled back, and yes, I am. For a brief, glorious second, I saw my mother's composure crack. The fallout came that night. Sarah called, her voice trembling with outrage. "Mom said you embarrassed them in front of the entire neighborhood." I did nothing but tell the truth. "She says you're punishing them for helping you when you were younger." "They didn't help me. They used me." Sarah went quiet. "They told me they're broke, Stace." "They're not. I saw the numbers. $784,000 sitting in their accounts." Another silence, heavier this time. "They said you were making that up." "Then fly here and see for yourself." She didn't reply. Monday morning, I walked into the kitchen to find my parents waiting for me at the table, looking unnervingly calm. Dad folded his hands. "We've thought about your little stunt," he said, "and we've decided something." "Wonderful," I said, "because I have something too." I slid a manila folder across the table. Inside was a lease agreement, drafted by Margaret. Mom opened it, frowned, and looked up. "What is this?" "A lease," I said evenly. "If you want to continue living here, you'll pay $2,000 per month, market rate, and agree to all listed terms. 6-month limit, no guests without permission, no modifications to the property. You're responsible for any HOA fines or damages you cause." Dad laughed, an ugly, humorless sound. "You can't charge us rent. We're your parents." I smiled thinly. "You're occupants of my investment property." Mom's lips trembled. "You'd really treat your own mother like a stranger?" "No," I said quietly. "I'm treating you like an adult, one who made choices." Dad pushed the papers back. "We're not signing." "Then I'm selling the house, for real this time." The silence that followed was cold and final. "You have 48 hours, I said, standing. "Sign it or leave." For 2 days, the house was dead silent. Not even the TV blared. I'd never realized silence could feel so loud. Then, on the 3rd day, Sarah showed up unannounced. She stood in my doorway, pale and wide-eyed. "They called me," she said. "They're scared." "Scared of losing control," I corrected. She followed me into the living room. The house looked like a war zone. Half their furniture, half mine, an ugly blend of styles and history. "This is insane," Sarah said. "You're going to charge Mom and Dad rent?" "You're welcome to host them for free," I said calmly. "You've got a spare room, right?" "I have 2 kids," she snapped. "You don't understand how hard this will be on them." "I understand exactly. I've been living it." I walked to my desk and pulled out a folder. Margaret's printed research, bank statements, investment summaries, house listings they'd rejected for petty reasons. No crown molding, kitchen faces west, not enough natural light. Sarah's face drained of color. "They told me they couldn't find anything affordable." "They don't want to find anything. Why would they? Free rent, full control, endless sympathy." Sarah sank onto the couch, her voice small. "Oh my God." She spent an hour in their room with the door closed. I don't know what was said, but when she came out, her face was set in stone. She gave me a small nod, a silent apology, maybe, and left without another word. That night, Dad knocked on my door. For the first time since moving in, he actually knocked. He held the lease in his hand. "We'll sign," he said stiffly, "but only for 3 months." 6, I said, "or the for sale sign goes up tomorrow." He hesitated, then sighed. "Fine, 6. He signed. Mom did too, though her signature trembled. The house felt heavier after they left the room, like the walls themselves were exhaling disappointment. But under that heaviness, I felt something else, a quiet, steady pulse. Control. By the next morning, the difference was startling. Dad turned the TV down. Mom stopped redecorating. They started cleaning up after themselves. They even looked at condos. Real ones this time. Ethan came over that weekend and saw the lease pinned to the fridge. "So it's official?" "Official," I said. "They're tenants now." He smiled faintly. "How does it feel?" "Like the first deep breath after holding your head underwater." 2 weeks later, Margaret called. "You'll never believe this. They've made an offer on a condo. Cash deal. Move-in date in 30 days. I almost dropped my phone. "You're kidding." "Never," she said. "Congratulations, Stacy. You've done what most people can't. You've taught family what a boundary actually means." I looked around my kitchen. The coffee maker was still on the counter, humming softly. My own mug, not my mom's porcelain set, sat in my hands. For the first time in months, I believed her. But I also knew better than to celebrate too soon. Because with my parents, peace always came with a price. The closing date arrived on a cloudy Tuesday morning in early June, 5 months and 3 weeks after my parents' temporary move-in. When the moving truck pulled up, I stood by the window, arms crossed, watching them load box after box. The trophies, the teapot, the endless pillows. Everything that had once swallowed my space was finally leaving. Mom busied herself giving orders to the movers, pretending I didn't exist. Dad handled the paperwork with his jaw clenched. Every now and then, his eyes flicked to me, filled with some emotion he wouldn't name. Pride, resentment, maybe both. I offered help. He refused. When the last box disappeared, Mom finally turned. "Well," she said, adjusting her scarf, "I suppose this is goodbye." "For now," I said softly. Her lips trembled. "You've changed, Stacy." "I had to." Dad exhaled, a sound halfway between a sigh and a growl. "You really think this is victory?" "No," I said, voice calm. "It's balance." They walked out without another word. The door shut, and the click of the latch echoed through the house like a gunshot, abrupt, final, and liberating. For the next hour, I just stood in silence. The rooms looked wrong, half empty and echoing, but they were mine again. The faint smell of my mother's floral cleaner still lingered, but even that felt temporary now. I opened the blinds. Sunlight hit the floor, washing over the space that had been buried under years of noise and guilt. I hadn't realized how starved the house was for light, or how much I dimmed myself to accommodate them. Ethan arrived later that evening with takeout and 2 bottles of wine. "They're gone?" he asked cautiously, scanning the spotless living room. "They're gone," I said, almost whispering it, afraid the universe might reverse it if I said it too loud. He grinned. "Then congratulations, homeowner." We sat on the floor, eating noodles out of cartons. For the first time in months, I laughed freely. No commentary from the next room, no guilt hovering in the corners. "I feel weirdly sad," I admitted. "Like part of me still wants them to understand." Ethan reached for my hand. "Maybe they will someday, but understanding doesn't always come before freedom." 2 weeks later, I got a call from Sarah. Her voice was quieter than usual. "I went to see Mom and Dad's new condo," she said. "It's nice, really nice." "Good," I said. "They deserve a place of their own." She hesitated. "They're still angry." They think you betrayed them. I smiled bitterly. They taught me how. Sarah sighed. You know, I thought you were being cruel. But now that I've seen their setup, the view, the furniture, the amenities, it's clear they were never desperate. They just liked control. I didn't reply. Sometimes silence is the only truth that fits. Before hanging up, she said, They may never say it, but I think you scared them, in a good way. Life didn't magically fix itself. There were still whispers from relatives, cold, ungrateful, money over blood. Uncle Robert even left me a voicemail calling me a capitalist who sold her parents out for comfort. But comfort wasn't what I'd bought, it was peace. And peace, I'd learned, costs more than any mortgage. One quiet Friday night, I sat at my desk again, my desk, in my office, preparing a presentation for work. The walls were bare except for a single photo, me and Ethan, smiling at a hiking trail, sunlight behind us. The "on a call" sign still hung on the door. It was faded now, but I kept it there. A relic of the war I'd won. Downstairs, the coffee maker hummed softly. Not hidden in a cabinet, not silenced for someone else's comfort. I poured a mug and carried it out to the porch. The air smelled like rain and cut grass. Across the street, a neighbor waved. I waved back. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel watched, or judged, or invaded. Just home. A week later, an envelope arrived in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single handwritten note in my mother's cursive. I hope you're happy. We're settled. Don't worry about us. No love, Mom. No apology, just a final line, underlined twice. Family is forever, even if you forget. I folded it carefully, slid it into a drawer, and whispered, I didn't forget. I just remembered myself. That night, Ethan and I hosted our first game night in 6 months. Leah laughed so hard she cried. Someone spilled wine on the rug, and I didn't care. When the laughter died down and everyone had gone, I stood in the doorway looking at the empty cups, the mess, the evidence of joy. My house was loud again, but it was the right kind of loud. Not chaos, not guilt, just life. I turned off the lights, feeling that quiet settle back in. The good kind this time. And for the first time since my parents moved in, I whispered to the walls, Welcome back home.